Morning everybody, welcome back after a couple of break. So we've been asked over the last couple of weeks to do a refresher on one of our little boxes. One of the boxes, well, it wasn't originally a little box, but anyway now it is a little box, but one of our small boxes, and I thought this is just a great time to revisit something that we did back in 2020. Now, I thought originally that in 2020 we did the special jewelry box. Sorry, not special jewelry, the secrets box and the desktop box as a program. I hadn't been back to have a look, by the way. But anyway, it was back in 2020. But since then, Pam has assured me that we've since visited that. But what we did with it last time is we made a number of different versions of it. And so what we need to do is go back to probably one of my favourite little boxes, I don't mind making the bigger boxes, but if I'm going to make a little box, this is probably one of my favourite ones. So we're going to revisit that today, and we're going to go through it as far as we can. I want to do a box to take a jig. I want to do a box for that, but I'm waiting for some parts which haven't turned up yet to be able to add to that box to house the router bits. But we'll continue with this until such time as that happens. So anyway, before we do start, what I want to do is I want to show you the new version, or not, it's not the new version, but the new colour of our tapered fences that go on our bench. This is the colour of them. The original ones that we made were this bright green, but we thought probably need to cover the safety issues and have something that's fluoro yellow so it stands out, and then you know what you're working with. So this is how it comes. It comes in two parts. This one here's the 15-degree one, of course. It's got a dovetail on it, and all you do is lock the two together and then put some super glue in there to hold the whole thing together. It won't ever move once it is done. This one has been glued and it's quite solid, and solid enough for what you're using for anyway. So when you sit it on your bench, if you're using this style of workbench, as you can see, it stands out quite bright. And yeah, quite safe, so that it can be used quite nicely like that. I would generally bring it up to about there so that I don't actually cut the end off it, but it's quite good for cutting the angles. So that's what they look like. Now when you buy a set of the kits, the kit will come like this. Of course you won't have the jig body, but you will get a stop, two stops, so one here, one here. You'll get a centerpiece with the knob and the slide that goes with it. You'll get a pair of clamp holders with it as well, and of course you're going to get this.
Oh, and you get that little angle,
yes, of course you'll get
the little measure.
You'll get a little square to go with it as well. So all of those parts are all the bits that you'll get, and these will be included, so you'll get these nice green and yellow things. Really Aussie colours, actually.
Yeah, they are.
Somebody did say patriotic.
Yeah, that was Derek.
Oh,
yeah, Aussie sports colours.
Yeah, so anyhow, so that's that. Now, as for the other jig, just put this one back. Not jig, as for the other job that we're going to work on. These are the router bits that we're going to use. I've just put them all together. So there's a collection of bits and pieces here that we go through. Most of these parts are actually in our kits. And I say most because some of them are not.
Some of them are extras, aren't they?
Are extras. So the round over bit, the TSR, no, what's it called? I'm having a moment, just give me a second. The collet's not a part of our kit. The two router bits will come with your jig. these parts here, so that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one are all part of our
Box
makers cutter kit. So they're all components. This is an extra. Don't normally have that in there because that's expensive, so we don't have it. And the bearing comes with our box maker cutter kit as well. So if you're going to use all of these bits the way I'm going to use them today, you probably have to get a box maker starter pack, or sorry, a box maker's cutter kit, and you'll need to add that, maybe that if you haven't got one. And of course the Allen key. This Allen key is for doing up the bits on there. Right. But anyhow, so they're all the bits that you will need for this job. I'm going to use a smaller one this time because I want to do something a little special with our bits. So if I put all these over here, the first thing we need to do is actually, I'll just leave this for a second and I'll describe what we're going to do. Originally, this was a little box. It didn't have the carving in it, of course, but this is the original little box. And it's a lift-off lid. It's A10 dovetails. So the A10 dovetail jig. Rounded over the top, rounded over in the bottom here. And actually, this one's not rounded over. This one's square.
So that's an earlier one.
That is the earlier one. And as I say, this is earlier. And it also has these lovely little sleeves in here that locate the lid in the right spot. Okay, so very simple little box, nothing fancy about it, but the beauty about this box is when we revisit it, you'll find that a lot of the skills that are involved in building that little box you can use in building any of the other boxes that we've got, and add some other skills to it, of course. So that was the start of all of our box making, really. This little version here, and then what we've done with it is we've elaborated a little bit, and we've done a few other little things. This is the same, it looks the same little box, only it has some hinges on it. Okay, so it's got a hinged lid. Now, we're not going to do that, but I'm just showing you this is what we do. Another version of it was this little one here, with a different layout in the way the lid is actually made. The lid on this one here is inlaid, this one here is inlaid as well, but it also raises above the box. And everything is square on it, so it's kept that way. It's
called eriganto.
We've given that a name,
yeah, which means elegant in Japanese.
So we have those versions there, and this is what Pam was saying to me earlier, was that we did do a version of it, but we did all these sorts of things, and this one here was a version of it as well, but in the trinket box format, but again, a small little box. And as you may have read on the thing there, I said it's somebody asked me a long time ago, why is it called a secrets box? Because it's only big enough to put a secret in. It's just tiny. Okay, so they're a little box like that, but as you can see, you can make a lot of different ones. So let's get all that out of the way. Now, to make it, there's not a lot of material involved in making it. And while I'm talking about the material, I'm just going to do a little bit of maintenance here. The material can be made from various bits and pieces of scrap, and I wouldn't say scrap, I'd say just offcuts from other boxes. Yeah. If you're making lots of different boxes, it's just a matter of making sure that your cuts are all the same, making sure everything is perfectly square, making sure that all your material is perfectly sanded correctly. So it's always a good idea to look, keep all your offcuts when you're making the bigger boxes, and you'll find that it's they come useful.
Just let's see
Now,
what you're doing there.
what I'm doing here is I'm just oiling up my collet reducer. Now, some people say, put oil on it, makes it slippery. Well, that's
sounds
not the case.
counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then on the top of the router here, I'm just going to take the collet out of here. That's been nice and clean in there. Give this a bit of a scrub as well. This 5-minute maintenance business is something that most people, well, no, I wouldn't say most, I say some people neglect, and it's not a very good idea. So keep your maintenance up on your gear. So what I've just done there is I've just given everything a bit of an oil. Just get my Allen key. You'll see there's a little grub screw in here. The grub screw is the sleeve here. It's actually got a little lip on the top of it that actually supports the bearing. If you don't look after the bearing, it will collapse. But to get the bearing and keep it up there, you need to make sure that little grub screw is nice and tight. There is a flat on the shaft here where that grub screw actually seats. The same on that one.
The other option is also to put some Loctite in there.
If it keeps coming out, put a little bit of Loctite in, as Pammy says.
Save a lot of grief.
Yeah. Okay, so I always use and start with my dovetail bits. Okay, let's get that out of the way. Just pop it down out of the way so I don't catch myself on it. Alright, now to make the box, I've got material cut. Now I'm going to try and get most of this work done pretty much during this show today. So if I can get pretty much all of it done, then we can visit the jig box next week. But if we don't get this done, we're going to go into the second week, and then we'll do the jig box the week after. So what I have here is I have some jacaranda. Oh, incidentally, this is what I've done here as well. I've cut myself some jacaranda framework, and I've got some material for sleeves, and I've got material for base, and a material for the top. Now the top and bottom materials are matched up. They are silky oak. All of this stuff has been sanded to 400, so it's all perfectly smooth, perfectly accurate, and we can just cut our bits off there as we need them. So I can make a number of different boxes. Now there's a comment by Viv earlier this morning on the website about accuracy, or not accuracy, about no mistakes. Part of the reason I revisit some of these is because you get out of the way of it and you forget things. Now I've done that in the process of getting set up. I've made 3 frames. Now, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I'm not happy with any of those frames, and yet this is something that I do all the time, is I make dovetails with the dovetail jig. And going backwards and revisiting some of the jobs that you've done in the past, or some of the projects that you've done in the past, is a good idea, a good way of keeping your skill level at a high level, rather than, oh, it's okay, it'll do attitude. I like to have it, this is perfect, and that's the way I like to do things. So in the process, as I said to Pam when we were asked to do the review, I could not believe the mistakes that I'd made with something that I do all the time, and this is the case. And I've had to cut separate sets of framework. I'm still not even happy with that one that we're going to use, but it's something that we should do all the time. So when we cut our material, it's always a good idea to check that things are square. Make sure things are perfect. And I get out of the way of it myself, and I forget these little things because I'm so focused on where the journey is going to end. And I rush through and cut myself some bits, and I realised in the process, the first one, half of it wasn't square, basically because I hadn't looked after my equipment and I had not checked that the saw was cutting square, or so readjust things and get things right before you actually go ahead. So now I've got them square. So as I said, this is a revisit, this is a rehash. So you're going to hear lots of things that probably I've said over and over and over again. I just have to remind myself to do them as well. So I've got two sets here, this is jacaranda here. I've got two pieces, this is two parts of the timber. One is the heartwood, which is the darker colour, and this is much more towards the outside of the tree, the outer edges towards the bark. This is the pith, right in close to the centre. You can see the difference in the colour. And sometimes that makes a difference to your little box. So for this case, I'm going to use the lighter one. And then we're going to, actually, yes I will, I'll use the lighter one. The box that I have made that I need to cut open is the darker one. You can see the difference.
Let's have a look at that.
So
yeah, it's subtle, but it's there.
It's there. And it will change again when I put the finish on it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, so let's do this. The first thing you need to do is cut your pieces of timber. Cut them all exactly the same size. These are 65mm wide. They're 100mm long, and they're 9mm thick. Now, you do not need to keep that, stay with all those measurements. You can make them 8mm thick. You can make them 110mm long. 65 wide, I tend to stick to that when I'm making 3 dovetail box, and that means I can expand one of the joints and cut the top off. So you need to sort of think about the width of it a little bit more so than the length and the height and the thickness. So then we need a jig. Also, what we'll need is we're going to need some of our variable joint spacers. These little variable joint spacers come in a pack of 8. There's 4 green ones, 4 yellow ones. The green ones are 2mm, and I'll explain why they're 2mm. The yellow ones are 3mm. I'll explain about the measurements and the reason they're that thick as we go through the process. So, when we set up a piece of timber, the first thing we need to do is establish the outside of the box. Now, normally I would use a piece of chalk, but because we've got white timber, white chalk's not going to be much good to me because it's too hard to see, right? And I use the chalk because you can do that. You can rub it off, and it's not going to hurt the timber. But for this, because it's an exercise, I'm going to use a pencil so that you can see what I'm doing. So all I'm doing is I'm just going to place my pieces of timber together. You can see they've actually been cut off the same length of timber.
Yeah.
Maybe at the other end.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. And that bit's been cut off there. So you can see how the grain looked on my piece of timber. So I want that grain to sort of carry on around the box. It's not the recommended method for actually having all of the joints exactly the same, or sorry, all of the joints meeting up with the correct grain. Generally what you would do is you would have a thick piece of timber and you would split it down the middle and use the 2 parts, and that way you would get all the joints. This end will eventually look the same as that. But see, the grain doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
So this is where you need to split the 2 pieces in down the middle.
So that's okay.
With this one here, you've got most of them looking pretty close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a face side mark on each of the boxes, each of these pieces. Now, my face side mark has a reason. The top of it is the round bit. Equate that to your head, it's at the top of your body. And the bottom is the skinny bit at the bottom, your feet, right? So this is going to be the bottom of the box. This mark has 3 meanings here. One, it will tell you the top of the box, it will tell you the bottom of the box, and it will tell you the outside of the box. That's the meaning of that mark, in my opinion. A lot of people do little triangles and squigglies and all sorts of things. Sometimes I find that extremely difficult to decipher. So
will you number
we keep up with this one here.
Will you number these so that they stay?
We can number them. Okay, so 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, and of course that's going to be 4 and 4, and that way all of those parts will go together. So I want dovetails in this one, and I want dovetails in this one. Okay, so the 2 ends and the 2 pinch jobs. Okay, so that's our markings. All I need to do now is set up in the jig. So when we set up in the jig, you can see I've been using this jig. This is where I've used the jig for the other boxes that I wasn't happy with. When we set up, the first thing I'll need to do here is actually give it a bit of a clean. I've got a bit of, just make sure that's tidy in there. So on this side, this is pretty clean, this one. Okay, dovetails. So my 2 dovetail bits are those 2 bits, my 2 pins pieces are that bit there. So when we set up, we set it up depending on how we want the dovetails to look. If you look at this little box, which one is it, this one? You'll see that I've got a half a dovetail at the top of the box and a half a dovetail at the bottom of the box, and of course I've got the 2 in the middle, so basically 3 dovetails. So 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to cut one down the middle. Okay, so that we do that. But what we have to do is we have to expand it so that we can cut that dovetail in half, right? So this one is going to be wider than that one. So set yourself up. If you want the half a dovetail here and a half a dovetail there, set it up so it's evenly placed across the dovetail. If you have difficulty judging whether that distance there is the same as this distance here, this is an easy way of fixing it. Turn the jig around and set it up here. 65 millimeters will give you a perfect 9 millimeter, perfect setup where you are just got this tiny little bit to judge here, and it's a lot easier to do it that way. Alright, now the top of the box is going to be cut on the blue stop. So if we position the variable joint spacer in there and slide our stop up, and lots of people struggle with this idea, push that up, and then we move 2 millimeters away from the blue stop and put in the other stop, the other thing. What we have now is a 4 millimeter space here. See how it's overlapped there and it hasn't here? That's what we have. We bring up our other stop and lock it in place. Okay, let's go back to our dovetail side. So we go back to our dovetail side and we position our piece of timber between the stops, and we make sure that the face side mark is pointing at the red stop. Now you need to make sure that happens with every piece of timber on your first cut of your joints. And then lock our piece of timber in place. So I'm just going to use a Bessie clamp on that. Now over the last I suppose 6 or 8 months of us selling the jig, we've had a number of people who have bought standard solo jigs. and I generally ring people and say, well, do you need your clamp holders for that? Clamp holders are these two flat plates on the top here. And as you can see, it locates the Bessie clamp so that the face of the clamp gives you enough space here so that when you raise your router bit up, you don't actually hit the bottom of the clamp. If you're just using a G-clamp, you'll find that the G-clamp has to be adjusted, and you need to make sure that you've got enough room under here. You can use a G-clamp, it's not a problem, but I find that just using a Bessie clamp or a click clamp like this and a pair of clamp holders, and you've got no problems whatsoever from there on.
And you never have to think about it again.
And you never have to think about it again, as Pam says. Okay, let's adjust our height. Now, when we adjust the height, what you normally do is you take, and this is the piece that doesn't have dovetails on it, this is the opposing piece that's going to fit into there. It rests on top of the jig, and then you adjust the router bit up so that it's 1/2 millimetre above your piece of timber, which is sitting on the template. So it's sitting on there. And I tell you, I even forgot that myself, and that's part of the reason I've gone to revisit some of this stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rest, this is a piece of material, an offcut from one of the templates, an old template that I damaged many, many years ago. And so all I'm doing is just put that down a tiny bit. So I've rested my piece of timber on top of here, and I've got 1/2 millimetre of exposed router bit above the piece of timber. So that's all we need. Now, when you're doing your test joints, and I advise you to use the correct material to do the test joints, for adjusting the tightness of the joint, always use the same material as you're going to make the box out of. Now, a lot of people say, oh yeah, but I'm using expensive material. A little piece at the end of it's not going to make any difference whatsoever to the cost of your box. But the cost of the piece of timber, you're still going to have to you'll either end up with it in the offcuts box, or you'll end up throwing it away eventually. So think about that. Use it to do your adjusting. Okay, ears on everybody. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut through the whole of the joints without talking to you. And during that process I'm going to be shifting, take real note, shifting my spaces from here to here and back again in the process. And then I'll explain to you actually what I did. Okay, so here we go. Ears on. Okay, so this is where we started. We started with our piece of timber set up like so. We cut the first one, we cut the second one. That gave us a dovetail. Okay. We then moved along here. We shifted our spacer, which meant we moved our timber 4 millimeters that way, which gave us a little overhang here, which we cut. Then we continued through and finished on the end. When we rotated, we left everything where it should have been, okay, or where it finished. And replaced our timber back in here, cut the first one, the second one, same process, starting from the green spaces, first one, second one, shifted our spaces along here, put the timber back in, cut that again, then we cut those two, and that gave us a piece of timber that has 2 expanded joints at the top of the box. And you can see the top of the box is indicated by our face side mark, shows the top of the box, and then we can cut that piece off all the way across there. I hope that's clear, because I'm going to do it again. We do exactly the same thing. We have finished the first cut where we started in the beginning, and we do the same again. This time making sure our piece of timber goes in, make sure our face side mark is pointing at our stop, our red stop, and we go through the process again. Let me have a little. My voice has gone croaky because I haven't done any work with my voice for so long. It's tea, not alcohol. Okay, we start again. And there you can see the expanded joint is at the top. Same with this one. Okay, so they're both exactly the same. Now, do not move anything on the jig. Keep it exactly the way you finished the dovetails. Turn the jig around to the other side. Position the pins piece with the face side mark out and the bottom of it pointing at my red stop again. Lock it in place. Do not move your spaces. Okay, we're going to change around a bit. We now have the straight cutter in there. And again, we use the opposing piece of material, that's the one we've already cut, to adjust the height. Now, the reason I keep saying that is because sometimes you'll find that somebody will have a different thickness piece of timber for the front and back as they do for the sides, or vice versa, of course. Different thickness on the sides. Just getting it perfect. I need 1/2 mil. Now you can measure that if you like, but I've been doing it so much I can generally do it by feel. Okay, so that's about 1/2 millimetre above. Okay, now when we cut this, this is where you have to remember, you cut a piece out of one of the dovetails here. You do not cut anything out of the pins, but you do shift things back and forth. Okay, so it's important to remember that if you cut pieces out of your dovetails, because you can do this in reverse, you can cut pieces out of your dovetails, you do not need to cut anything out of your pins. I'll show you why. Now, we've only got 3 dovetails, so when I cut this, I'm going to start again at my green spacer. I'm going to cut the first one, okay, and when I cut the first one, I'm going to cut across the face of it just so as I don't get too much tear out, and then I'll remove the material from behind there. Okay, so I'll do that first. I will then shift my spacers up to the other end and continue my cuts all the way along. Okay, so there's no recutting of anything this time, but the movement of the spacers is pretty much the same. So what you will have noticed there was, when I started, I had my spacers here, which is what we did right at the beginning when we cut the dovetails. I cut my first one, and then I shifted the spacers up to the other end, which meant I moved 4 millimeters that way, and then I cut the other 2 of the joints, right? And what that's done is given me an extra wide pin, and I'm just going to cut down through that pin when we cut the top off. So when I get to that stage, I generally give it a little bit of a test just to see that I've got it right. And there it is, it's a perfect little dovetail, set of dovetails. Tidy up and glue together quite nicely. So it's quite a simple little task, and it's got expanded one. You'll see I'm flush on the top, I'm flush on the bottom as well. So everything is put together quite nicely. So now it's just a matter of completing it. And so I finished there. So we take our piece of timber out, we rotate it, pop it back in. Ears on. I'm going to stop there for a second. just want to show you something that it comes up in questions when I speak to people and people who are making inquiries about the jig and how it works and all that sort of thing. You'll notice when I'm cutting my joints, I'll put that back in and I'll just show you. When I'm cutting my joints, my hands, when I'm holding the jig, are at both ends of the jig. They're not sitting on top of it like this. If you have your hands on top here, you tend to have less control of the jig. It can move around a bit. Whereas if you have your hands resting on the bench and you're just using your fingers, you'll find that it's much more comfortable and a much easier way of using the jig by having your hands at both ends of it. They're well away from the spinning around a bit, so they're not going to get hurt. All you need to do is just make sure that you're moving around and you've got adequate room to be able to put your hands on the table. It will work on any table, so it doesn't matter, you don't have to have one we've got, but you can use any router table. When we turn it over, what you'll find when you'll be doing it, you'll notice how I use it. I'll cut through, or I'll cut the face off the pins particularly, and then I will cut through, but you'll notice that I go in and out 3 or 4 times. That's so that we clear out all of the material between the pins. If you don't clear all that material out, you will find that one of your joints won't fit very well, and you start second guessing yourself and thinking, what have I done with the machine? What is the gear set up correctly? You start sort of, thinking of things that really don't occur. But so this technique that I use by going in and out, and you'll notice that I do it here, is a really good one for getting all of that out. Now, when you do come in and out, you need to come all the way out so that the router bit clears the piece of timber. If you don't do that, you end up a little round bit in the top here, and the joint has little curves in it rather than straight sides. Okay, let's go again. So there's all my parts for my jig. So we don't need the dovetail jig anymore. We've used it to do all the dovetails, so we can put that away. So a few weeks' time we'll have a box to put that in. Remove the router bit because we don't need that router bit anymore. We're going to use others. Okay, 2 and 2. 2 and 2, that's 2 and 2. One and 1. That's 1. That's 1. And 4 and 3. Okay, and so I have a nice little frame. And you can see I've got an expanded joint here. This is the one we're going to cut in half. Right. So when we turn it this way, you can see it's going to cut down through the middle of it, and we're going to have 3 whole dovetails. Okay, so they're just one little bit, and when we cut that in half, that one will end up the same size as that one there. And you can see these two are the same, so forth. Flush on the top. Our next task, when you look at the little box, our next task, you can see in the bottom we have a recess where we've actually recessed the bottom of the box. So that's recessed in. You'll also see that I've got room here, 10 millimeters between there and the top edge of the frame, of the box base, but lots of material here to support the base. The top is also recessed in. You can see it's recessed down in there, recessed in there. And the thickness of that piece of material is 10 mil. The thickness of this piece of material is 4 mil. Now, what I have here, this is the one that I'm not very happy with. And you can see why I'm not happy, is because it's actually quite difficult to get it apart. It'll still end up a nice little box, it's just that I'm not happy with the way it was constructed. And you can see what we've done here is I'm going to cut a trench here and a trench there, and both of those trenches are going to be 10 millimeters from the top to the top edge of the trench. So from there to the top edge. One's for a 4 mil piece of material, which is what I showed you earlier in the piece. And the other will be for a 10 millimeter piece, which we have to adjust to fit. The other piece will be a 10 millimeter piece, and as you can see, it's as thick as the trench. I'll probably use the other bit better. So one bit will go in there, and this bit will fit like so. And it's flush with the top of the box. Okay, so they're the two pieces that are going to go into this box. Okay, how do we cut those trenches? The box is together the way it's going to live, so I'm going to put a piece of tape around that just to hold it in place. Now, if your joints are really, really tight, probably don't need a piece of tape, but I do it every time without fail for safety reasons. Just making sure that everything is taped together and is not going to move on me through this process. I can see we're already running out of time because I've been blabbing on. So unfortunately this is going to be a 2-week process. But what I'd like to do is get this bit glued up this week anyway, or close to it anyway. I don't need that there. Okay, now the router bit I'm going to use here is my what we call a rebate cutter. It cuts a 5 millimeter deep trench, 4 millimeters wide. Okay, so that's a 4 millimeter cut, 5 millimeters deep. Now when you purchase this, that's how that router bit comes. It comes with a little bearing on it like that. If you wish to use the process that I'm going to use here, you will need to purchase a 19 millimeter bearing. If you purchase an Ultimate Cutter kit, you will get one. If you purchase a Master Cutter kit, you will get one in the kit as well. Okay, so while it's there, we're going to remove that. Now this process is something that I do with all of my boxes that I put 4 mil floor into. I've just replaced the little bearing with the bigger bearing. Keep those aside. Now, as I said, I'm going to set my height at 10 millimeters, and this is where the LARK tool comes in. Set my LARK tool at 10 mil, so that's just 10 mil. So what I'm going to do is sit that on here. Drop that down to 10 mil. 10 mil. Okay, so just 10 millimeters. I've got it sitting on top of the tooth, so it's just a matter of it. I probably need to go down a tiny little bit. Might do better. Yep. Okay, so it's 10 millimetres to the top of the router bit, top of the card. So my voice has decided it's not happy today. Okay, so this cut, move this off here. And what we're going to do here, what I've done is I've reduced my depth of cut from 5 millimetres down to 4 mil. Now, because we've gone down, sorry, I'll rephrase that, that was incorrect, from 5 mil down to 1.5 mil. Okay, now that 1.5 millimetres is the beginning of the trench. When you look at my trenches, you can see that it's really, really sharp around the edges. So nice clean cut, right? That's what we want to create here. There's nothing worse than looking into the bottom of the box. If you look in the bottom of the box here and you end up with tear out happening, it just means that you haven't set up things properly and your skill level needs to be lifted a tiny little bit. But this is a technique I use to avoid any of those tear outs, and we just cut out both trenches at the same time. So I've got the box taped together, it's not going to fall apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to climb route the first cut. Because I'm only cutting a small amount, what's happening is the router bit is actually going to be scooping things out as we move along, because we're going with the rotation of the router bit. Not the normal procedure. The normal procedure is always go against the rotation of the router bit. This time we're going to go with the rotation of the router bit and cut a 1 mil trench. So ears on. And so you can see here, we've cut a nice clean trench. We've got really sharp edges, but we haven't gone into the corner, basically because of the diameter of the router bit. So we need to go into the corners. So what I'm going to do now is just going to flip the box over, and I'm going to do one on the top edge as well. So ears on. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but I've got a trench here and a trench there. Now I'm just going to revert back to the original bearing that comes on the router bit. Put the original one back on. This time, because we're cutting a lot of material, we go against the rotation of the router bit, so I'm going to go around the other way. I went round this way here the first time, this time I'm going to go around that way. Okay, so I'm pushing against the tooth. So ears on. So there's my trenches, and when you look at the trench you can see it is a really clean little trench, and we've actually gone into the corner as well. So we've done that in all of the bits. Now before we actually pull it apart, we have to pull it apart because we're going to cut feet in it as well. Measure up for the top and the bottom. Now when I measure the top and the bottom, I've got a 5mm trench there. Now the easiest way to show you that is just get a small ruler, and you can, if I poke the ruler into the bottom, it goes to the 5mm mark on the ruler. Alright? So it's only 5mm deep. So it's pretty accurate between there and there. What we're going to do now is I want to measure, that's 5mm to the inside. It comes to 89mm here. Instead of going to 94mm, which is the depth of the trench, let's go to 93mm. And that's the thing. What that will do is leave a little gap around. So that one's 93. And then we'll measure across this way. It's always a good idea to check both. It's exactly the same. So my piece of timber is going to be 93mm square. Okay. So 93 by 93. I've written that down on there. That's going to be both the top and the bottom panels. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark. I've got the numbers on there, but I still want to make sure that I've got a mark here and a mark here, and make sure that when I put the box together, those two marks go together. So if you don't use the numbers, putting a mark there, very, very important. You can see the skills that I'm using here. You probably say, oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. I said that too. And I made some errors. So, pull it apart. When we pull it apart, set yourself a piece of timber on just a block of wood of some description. Make sure it's flares, clamp it down, and use that to wriggle your joints apart. Okay. Pull it apart. Pull that apart. Okay, so there's my 4 parts now. The box frame. It's just a matter now what I want to do is I want to cut some feet in the bottom before we actually make the base and before we make the top. Now to do that, shift stuff off here. The router bit I'm using there is a spiral bit. Now we sell the TSRW12 that we use for our feet, but we don't sell it in any of our kits. It's an individual sale. They are expensive, unfortunately, but if you're making lots of boxes like I do and you're using that process all the time, then they are worth the value in purchasing a box, a cutter like that. So if you're using 2 different thicknesses, use the thickest piece of material to adjust your height. Now when I adjust the height, I just make it so it fits above the thickness of the timber. It's not important how the height above the timber is, it should be a little thicker, a little higher than the piece of timber. And now we need a fence and a stop. So I have my fence here, and Pammy's going to have to go for a little walk because she's going to have to come around here. My fence, oh, I've got the wrong one. Got the panel raising one. My fence has is designed to take my straight cutter. And what I'm doing there is I'm just making sure that the tooth is 90 degrees to my fence.
Bit hard to see that.
A bit hard to see that, but it's there. Okay, now, next step. Mark where you are going to cut. With these pieces of timber, you've got a top and a bottom. Right? Of course, that's the bottom, but we want to be cutting here. And I'm going to mark that quite significantly because when we're cutting it, we can't actually see the outside marks when we start. Pencil mark. And if you haven't got these markings on the outside, the top, of course, is where the lid's going to be, where you're going to cut the top off, and the bottom, of course, is the smaller bit. So all I'm doing is just putting a mark there. That will cut away when I use it. Oh, the other thing I have to do is measure. With a square box, your feet are going to be all the same size. Right? If I was doing a rectangular box, I'll be able to get one down very quickly. If I was doing a rectangular box, this part is shorter than that part there. It just doesn't look right. Tipped everything upside down there. It just doesn't look right with the same size on the short side and the long side. So on a short-sided box, on the short sides, get a short foot. On the long sides, get a long foot. On a square box, of course, they're all the same size. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to set my LARK tool at, say, 15mm. Actually, I might set it at 20mm. Okay, so a 20mm foot, it's going to look all right. Let's just set it up there. Yeah. Okay, now, the easiest way to mark this, and you only need to mark one, because they're all the same size piece of timber. Stand your piece of timber up so everything is facing away from you. Lay it down on its back like that and then work on the left hand side of the piece of timber. So if I put that there, and put my mark there, what my foot is going to be is that little bit there. I'll need exactly the same size on there, same with all the others. Now the easiest way to do that, I could go through and mark them all, but that's just a lot of time wasting and I'm not always going to get it right anyway. So what I do is, first of all, I'm going to use this piece here. I want to make sure that the foot does not encroach above that line. Okay. So if I sit that in there, and adjust my fence to the outside edge of my tooth. Just do it by eye, it doesn't have to be perfect. Lock that into place. I've got a clamp here somewhere. Now normally I would attach my dust extractor to that, but I'm not going to do that today. It's just a step too far at the moment. The next thing I want to do is I need to have a fence. Now when we set up, what I'm going to do here is use the left hand side of my cutter and I'm going to place it on my mark. Just there. And then push my fence up to the piece of timber. And we'll clamp that in place. And make sure that's set so that it doesn't move. You don't want anything moving. Now when we do this, Very simple task. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put the end of it up against my stop, push in, and it'll cut in so that I'm flush up against the fence. And I'm going to move along to, say, 3/4 of the length, and then I'm going to flip my piece of timber over and I'm going to redo it. I'll show you what the result is. Okay, so what that's done for me is, first of all, by doing it, setting it up this way, it's given me an even distance from here to here as here to here. I only marked that point there, but if you measured from there to there, you would find it would be exactly the same from there to there. Also, I've only taken out a small amount, which means I've got plenty of material in here to support the base depending on what you put in the box. I can also round over that outside edge and it will give me a nice clean foot where our two pieces are going to touch the floor. Okay, so now it's just a matter of going through and doing all the others. Now, because they're all the same size, you don't have to move anything, but if I had a longer piece of timber, I would have to do the two short ones first, then do the two long ones afterwards. That caught for some reason. It caught for some reason. I don't know why, but I think what happened is my fence moved. So let me fix this. I might change my fence. Put a higher one in. Just got to be really careful. Okay. Don't know why that moved. Something happened there. Well, let's fix this it. So now when we put it together, it's 3 and 3. 3 and 3. Let's just do 1. You can see we've got that lovely little foot that sits on there like that. And when you look at the bottom, you can see that everything's exactly the same size. I'll just sit that way. Okay, so it's quite a nice little fit. Okay, so the distance from the corner to there is the same as the distance from the corner to there. Okay, I'm just going to round over those outside edges, and then we're going to look at the base and the... Right, so we don't need this anymore, don't need this anymore. way.
Should leave some work for next week, Cole.
I will. It'll be fitting up the top and the bottom. And glue up, cut off the top. I've got a lot to do next week, so I'm going to carry on a little bit. What time is it now? 10:15, 11:15. So what I'm going to do here, normally when I do this, I would use a larger router bit, but it's a tiny box, and I just want to make a little bit of a difference to the original ones. So I'm using that router bit. Good catch, Pammy. Often what I would do here, I would do this after I have the box assembled, but I've found that it's a little easier to do it before we're assembled. I'm just erasing that router bit so that it just clears the piece of timber. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to feed that onto there, and I'm just going to feed it along until it comes to the end here, and that's where I'm going to stop. Okay. Here's on. And so what that's done is to round it over the bottom of the foot recess, and just softened the side of the box. Just made it that nice soft look. And so that will go together. Got to find the right bits so that they all go in the right place. The easiest way to do it is to find my two crosses. Those two bits go together. And the rest of it has to go the right way. And so our little box is starting to come together. You can see now I have a nice little framework, and I have the feet done and the inside done. So what we'll do is we'll end here. Next week I'll fit the lid and the base, glue it together, cut the top off it. It sounds like a lot of work. Cut the top off it and fit some sleeves in it, and that will make our little box complete. So we'll do that. We'll do all of that next week. So even going through this with you means I've helped myself by thinking through things that I'd forgotten or I disregarded in the past, but now I'm sort of back in the swing of things, and I could probably make a dozen of those fairly quickly without making an error. But as I said before, right at the beginning, I made 3 frameworks, and none of them are up to the standard that I expected myself. And so revisiting is always a good idea. Rehash, do the things that you enjoy doing, and you'll find that eventually you'll get it right. So even if you do make a mistake, it's not a lot of material to waste. if you do make an error. But anyway, we'll go from there. Now, one other thing before we go. Over the last couple of weeks, or couple of months actually over the last year, really, people have been saying to us, and this is something that we've resisted. People have been saying to us they'd like to contribute to what we do. And we feel that we do things for free. We don't mind giving this information to you so that you can use it for whatever you like. But people have become more persistent about the fact that they'd like to contribute to our cause. Now, we're happy to accept it, but we don't expect it, but we will accept it. So what we've done to make things easy is we've set up Buy Us a Coffee link on our website. So if you wish to buy a coffee for us...
On our YouTube channel.
On our YouTube channel, sorry. Link onto the channel, and on the front it says buy me a coffee, I think that's what it says.
Yeah, that's right.
Click on it, and then you can put in some details and donate whatever you like. We suggest just a coffee. It's $5. You can do as many coffees as you like. There is also a square that says if you wish to do it monthly, you can do that. You do not have to. We don't expect it. If you want to do one thing at a time, by all means you can do it whenever you feel the need to contribute to our causes. But like I say, we don't expect it. We do this for free, and we're happy to do that. And but if you are generous enough, and we really do thank you if you wish to contribute, by all means do. But
yeah, and at the same time, just subscribing to our channel and showing up on and watching it on Sunday or afterwards, that's fantastic. It really is good.
Yeah.
Like today, we've got 218 views,
holy dooly,
which is brilliant. I mean, for us, we don't watch these things, but that's something. That is really something. So thank you, everybody. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
So anyway, we'll finish the little box next week. We'll get it to a stage where we can sand it up and put a finish on it. But yeah, that'll be it for the week. So have a good week, everybody, and we will see you all next week.